mind the beeping? Oh Lord, see now that's what's gonna be the problem.
What?
Is that gonna bother you? My smoke detector?
It's not gonna bother me.
Okay.
Is it gonna bother you? That's the.
No, I just don't want it to mess up your recording. You'll see it. You'll hear it. You'll hear it. And now you're in your thoughts for an entire week, like, hey, okay.
Yes.
Now, okay.
Yes. Welcome to the third episode of Couch Time with Kayla. Here I brought another one of my bona fide. Hey, you see what I did there? Sisters in Delta with me. And we're gonna talk a little bit about like what to expect between and after the therapy session, because everything ain't so sweet and everything ain't so rough in between. There's some things to be aware of. And so I'm gonna allow Bree you just to introduce yourself so they know like who they're talking to.
Okay, so hello, I'm Bree. I am a school counselor, a LPC or licensed professional counselor under supervision. So I'm currently working towards being certified in that role, or like officially licensed, I guess, in that role. But I do have clients that I see on a regular basis. I work with students, I work with adolescents, I work with kids, I work with adults, families, couples. So I'm kind of doing all of it. And I also go to therapy as a therapist. And so this is my fourth year as a school counselor or working in education as a counselor. And this is my first year actually working with clients and clientele, having a clientele under me. And I just started this year. So I've been really excited. It's been really fun. And it's stressful in the best way, just because I love to work with people. I love listening to people's thoughts and how they became the person that they are. I'm a puzzle person, so I'm like this profession was made for me because I just like helping people work through their issues and maybe giving them insight into things that they might not have ever thought that they were dealing with, or might not have any resources or tools to help them get to whatever place that they want to be. So yeah, it's a little about me.
Awesome. Learn a little bit about your heart here, right? So this is gonna be a fun episode because we're talking as both people who are in the profession and people who are also like benefiting from the profession as a client, right? All right, so we're just gonna jump into it, and I'm gonna also be doing the same because this is a really important topic. And so when you like started going to therapy, how did you expect that you would feel, right? Even as a therapist, knowing what happens is like when you sat down on that chair on that couch, how did you expect to feel like after in between therapy?
So my question to you then is, the first time that I went ever, or first time in a while? Because it's been like, I think that also speaks volumes to my experience as well. But I can say both.
Yeah, sure. Go. I love that you said that. All right.
Okay, so yeah, my first time going, it's hard, and I love this about being a therapist. It's fun and also really frustrating for, I'm sure, me and my therapist, because I have this I have this awareness about myself that I think that most people don't have. So me going to therapy for the first time, I was expecting someone to give me some profound information, or some, even knowing that it wasn't what I should be expecting, but I wanted somebody to give me the pieces that I couldn't put together, even though I knew that I had a lot of already insight into my own thoughts and my own feelings. So when I went and I sat there, and I think depending on who you go to as well, that also matters as to what you get out of the session. So I talked a lot. That was just my experience. And some people feel like I don't know what to say when I go to therapy. Oh, I had a lot to say. So I don't even think that she, and it was a she had really said a lot my first session, but it did feel really great to be able to bounce thoughts off of somebody. Knowing that I've done it with friends, I've done it with family, but somebody who I knew understood on a deeper level, like how to respond to somebody going through these issues or whatever it was that I was going there for. Like I said, you can bounce things off of friends who might not really know what to say, right. But even though she didn't know what to say, that was enough for me to like just have her hear it. And so Yeah, it was a good experience my first time. But I think I was more disappointed in the fact that like most of the time was spent with my voice instead of me listening to somebody. So, and then I guess my second time, because I've been through, and tell me if I'm going past something that I mean, might want to ask later, but I didn't put much thought into the type of person that I wanted to see. So at first I was just kind of desperate to find somebody to speak to because I felt like I really needed to talk to somebody. And then later I realized how important it is to make sure the person that you're seeing gives you, I guess, the therapeutic experience that you're looking for, or you can relate to them. And I think that's a huge part of it, is relating to that person enough where you feel understood, even besides advice or working through the things that you're working through. So my first therapist ever was a older white lady, which was fine, but I think that I didn't know how much we had rapport. She was very sweet, but I don't know if that was enough for me. And then I started to realize my second therapist was a white man. And as I'm healing and as I'm going through this process, I'm realizing that I needed him to be my therapist because of the trauma that I had experienced, and I was more comfortable with men. And then as I start, and it's crazy how we work through our own traumas and our own like trials and tribulations and start to have these revelations about ourselves. But as I got even more healthy, I guess, mentally, I realized how I needed a female and I needed her to be Black. Mm-hmm. And so now currently my therapist is a Black woman, and I love her. and like I said, all my other therapists were great, but I had to work through that process of like, wow, like I didn't know what I was doing at first. Now I'm, I always needed a man. I'm like and I'm being full transparency, like my problems and my issues that I was facing was my dad and not having a strong male figure in my life. So every coach that I've ever had, any mentor or somebody that I looked up to, it felt more comfortable for me to have a man. I liked that better. I thought that they were harder on me. I felt like I could, I wanted to make them proud. So when I was looking for a therapist, that's why I felt comfortable. But then again, as I started healing, that didn't feel as comfortable anymore because I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them to care about me. I didn't need them to like tell me that I was doing a good job, or like, oh, you're working through things. And now here I am with somebody else. And maybe I'll realize that maybe I don't need a Black female either. I don't know, but it's just part of the process. So
I like how you hit on that though, because like you hit on like, okay, how do I find the right person for me? And sometimes that right person isn't going to be like the person I have for like the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. You hear people say like, oh, I have this therapist, I had it for like 15 years, they're the best for me. But truly it's like we're like onions, and like the more we shed, it's like, okay, I find a nice fit for me. And therapists, own that. And so I'm glad that you noticed that. I'm glad you said that, because I had a very similar experience too. Because I've had 4, and my first one, was a Black woman, and it was all right. It helped me through some things I was going through, like race, and I think I was very similar. It's like, okay, I needed a Black person to affirm who I was and my identity and my sexual orientation. And then I was like, once I got that, I was like, we really ain't vibing at all. I was like, I just need you to be Black. I need you to affirm. And then I was able to go some more, and I found a white woman, and it was okay. I felt like I got a lot of healing. That's what introduced me to EMDR and all of that, John.
Okay, yeah.
And so it was great. And then I was like, okay. Then I went back to a Black therapist, and I did tit for tat. My therapist right now is a white man, but I learned I have to ask for what I need. Right? What I was doing is I was seeking like what they look like, what it feels like. Yeah. And now I was like, okay, I want to see like what you can do, and help me with this specific issue.
Yeah.
So it was pretty, I'm glad you said that, because, and especially as counselors, that's something that we really look into when we're trying to find somebody.
And I think it's very important that I think it should be probably one of the first things that you and don't notice, like we were just saying, like you don't know until you go, but yeah, that would probably be the best advice, is make sure that's somebody that you are, you're relating to and you're comfortable with.
Right. Okay. So when you was in when you were in that first session or even like the first few, did you ever have the expectation that you're like, all right, boom, like I'm gonna feel so much better after this session. I'm gonna go to that next one. I'm like, I don't even need therapy no more. Uh, or like, did you have a different experience with any of the times?
Yeah, it was very different for me. And it kind of really just depended on where I was in my life. I've been through a lot of transitions recently. And I've been making my therapy a priority. Um, Even though it's always been a priority, like I think I definitely have fallen into like, okay, I can deal with it. I can do like my little coping mechanisms and my skills that'll help me in between time. Also money is an issue as well. So like if I wasn't able to make it to that session because of, finances, then I needed to figure out what I needed to do to keep me keep me sane until the next time I could go. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily expecting to be fully healed, but yeah, there was a degree of me that, like I was saying before, talking it out, and it's different for everyone. Like sometimes just talking and having a sounding board is enough. And I think that was me. And I always felt great because I was able to just release everything. Journaling used to be a huge thing for me, but look, there was a situation with my journal. I've journaled for my entire life, and there was a situation with the journal, and I will tell you, I'm grieving the loss of my journal, which is crazy to think about, but it's something that like was not finished, it wasn't completed, and it was destroyed. And like I've not been able to journal since that situation. So now I lost that one thing that really helped me to keep myself together. And then I had this therapist thing. So now I get to vent and open up and like share all of my thoughts and all my feelings with this person. So it did help a lot. And I was able to feel good, but it definitely needed that week. After that week though, I'm like, okay, some other stuff has happened. Let me get this out. But yeah, so when it becomes 2 weeks, yeah, I start to feel it. I start to feel it because then it becomes, something that's good. It's a habit. It feels good. And when you break that habit, and if you break that routine, then, and that's the other thing I had to tell myself, like, yes, the therapist is great, but it shouldn't be something that you depend on, because you have to, learn how to, that's the whole point, is to learn how to help yourself eventually.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because the truth is we learn how to depend on a healer, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes people go into therapy, especially Black people, right? Learn like, okay, especially Black women, don't depend on nobody. You can only depend on yourself.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you got somebody who is validating you, listening, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't wait to tell my therapist. This thing is like, shoot, I got 2 weeks. What I'm gonna do to cope with this. But it happens, and it's like, because it's an attachment, right? Sometimes people think therapy is just like, I just talk and they're just there, but truly, like, you're building a whole relationship with someone. And often people who come to therapy like don't have a lot of spaces where they feel like I can connect on this level and this authentic level with someone else.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I expected, and be full honest, I expected to, in between therapy, like after that first one, I expect to be like, all right, I don't really need this that much. So for me, I was like, I just need to have this one. I just need to say it, and then I'm here and I'm good. And in between, I'm be honest, I did not expect to feel feelings the way I did. Be as triggered as I did, because I was like, we're working backwards, even as a therapist. Sometimes I still have to remind myself that that's a part of the process. I was like, I'm gonna feel all these feelings in this office. Outside of it, I'm be cool because I finally got my space. And I learned that is not the case at all.
No.
An expectation is that you're gonna feel drunk even more. And it's gonna hurt even more, because now it's like, oh, I'm talking about this thing happening in my life. And now someone's validating that I deserve to be upset about that. I deserve to be like sad about that. And now I'm going up out here and I'm mad and I'm sad because I feel like it's okay, but the people out there don't feel like that's okay.
Yes. And I like definitely I as a therapist, I tell my clients, you know, if you need to text me, like I'm fine with you texting me. If they're really going through something, if you need some support, you know, please don't hesitate to send me a text or a call, and we can work through whatever it is that you're dealing with. And so as somebody who does that for my clients, that's not always the case for everybody. So I wasn't sure if my my therapist was okay with that. And there was one day, I will say, I was going through it. When I say like really going through it. And it was after our first session, and I like talked her whole ear off. I think we were in there for maybe an hour and a half. And you know, something had happened where I knew that I had to make a decision, and you know, one way or the other, I was going to be dysregulated. It was going to upset me. And then something else happened that interrupted my processing of that other thing that I had to process. And so I had to text her. I'm like, hey, I am so sorry. I don't know if you're okay with this, but I really need to talk to you. So then she's like, okay, no, it's fine. So I appreciated that I could reach out to her before the week was up, because I think there is this like thought that like I can't talk to my therapist until our next session, you know, and I don't know, some people may have that, but I appreciated that she was somebody that allowed me to kind of get some of my things out, because that's a long time. 7 days, a lot of things can happen in 7 days, and you know, to have to wait and sit on something and, you know, not want to. I always say, like, if you're going to talk to a friend, I've tried to practice, you know, asking them, hey, are you in a place to receive, you know, I'm dealing with something. Are you in a place to hear and listen to the things that I have going on? Because, you know, you add your stress onto your friends, because our friends care about us. So, you know, like I try my best to, you know, not do too much and give too much of my own issues to my friends, because I know they go through things too. So yeah, it's difficult to wait an entire week, but you know, it's okay to use your friends a little bit. But yeah, that time in between can be really rough.
Right. And I love that you said the boundary piece with your friends, because what could happen is the more you go to therapy, you start to feel comfortable actually talking to people, and then everybody may not be responsive to that. And so, you know, asking, because to get that information, that's gonna help you to know if I can like lay this out.
And that takes a lot of practice. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You're right.
No, I was just gonna say that because, like, you know, somebody who understands how feelings can compound on you, and other people's feelings can as well. You know, I don't get offended if somebody tells me no, but if I were somebody who didn't understand that, and I were to ask and they'd be like, nah, I can't today, that would offend some people, because we expect our friends to just listen and take on all of our problems, because like, you're my friend, I'm trying to vent to you, like, girl, let me talk to you about this, like, but you got to be considerate of whatever, you know, they have going on in their lives and whatever is mixed up in their head right now.
Exactly, because we're all going through something. That's why I like those posts that show up to say like your friends aren't therapy.
Yeah.
I think that's what people expect. Like, I don't need no therapist, I got a crew. Yes, you got a crew, but they can't carry everything you're going through. So thinking through that, like in your experiences of therapy, have you ever had those moments for yourself where you just like, I just feel like this isn't working, right? Quote unquote, feeling like I should be further along, or I feel like something should be better. Have you ever had any experiences like that?
I would say I feel more like that as a therapist than I do as a client. Okay. Again, going back to that piece of like, everyone's different. I definitely commandeer like most of my sessions, and so, you know, the therapist doesn't have to say much. She can chime in every once in a while, and I understand that that's what I like for me. For my clients though, who are not as talkative or don't have as much awareness, it's harder, because I feel like I have to come up with a lot of things that I need to say. They're not as open to communicate and to share, because they just don't know. So I feel sometimes like I'm pulling, I'm like trying to pull things out of these people. And so I do sometimes feel like, oh gosh, I wonder if I should be doing more. And, you know, it's hard. And some of my clients are really young. So like, I make sure I let them know, hey, if this is not working for you, it does not hurt my feelings because it's about you. It's about your health, your mental health, your healing. So if I'm not doing or giving you what you feel you need, or if you don't think that this is going anywhere, please tell me, and I would be happy to, recommend or refer you to somebody else that I think would be a good fit. But yeah, so it's hard because they don't want to give that feedback, because everybody always feels like they're hurting someone's feelings. So,
yes.
But I think that I'm doing a good job. It's a little bit of imposter syndrome probably going on there because I'll be dealing with that a lot.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think I definitely feel that more when I'm doing therapy than I do receiving.
And I believe every therapist has to be going through that consistently of like, am I doing this right? Because we look to our clients to know, like, okay, this is what you need. Okay, oh, I see an effect. Got it. We on the right page, because it's like a relationship, even for the therapist.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And so I would say I do have a lot of clients. I mean, what you talking about, I just experienced that today, and I was like, I don't really know. How do you feel about it? They're kind of stuck to it. And then it came up as like, oh, you you don't really maybe want this to be helpful for you as a person, because it's like you don't want somebody to see you. And so sometimes it's like, okay, and this is what we talked about in the first episode, even like with Chrissy, was talking a little bit about like, okay, I'm worried that my therapist like may not be able to help me, or I don't know if I really want you to know all this about me. And sometimes on the other end, you know what I mean? That's what comes up. It's like, it feels like we're like, okay, I don't know how to help, because they're really working against like protective parts of like
a huge barrier. Yes.
So I had that situation today, and I was like, I'm just gonna sit here. Let's build this. I want to get to know you. Or no, I don't want you to get to know me at all, And I've had that so many times, but I have like a lot of clients do have that experience of feeling like it's not working. And I think us in the profession might know it takes time. It's a process, and I'm curious in like where that comes from. But I think there are a lot of expectations between and during that I'm just going to feel like the best. And it's just, I won't need it anymore. And I do wonder if some of that still comes, from the stigma of mental health. It's like, if you actually need maybe that one session, it's okay. Like, we've gotten to like go see a therapist, but if you continue to see a therapist, what does that mean?
Like, oh God, I can't be fixed.
Yeah, it's like, what you mean like another session? I thought, I would do that myself, and that was me more just like, I don't want to talk to you too much. But I do wonder, a lot of people experience that, and there have been times when people get upset at their therapists because it's like, you're not helping me. You hear people who like frequently fire their therapists.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's something that happens. And so with the client, have you ever had one that said that to you, or like, I feel like this isn't working?
Luckily, no, not yet. I'm gonna say not yet because everybody's different, I definitely have had I have had a client, another young person, in our diagnostic interview. She was like, so how many times do I see you? Like, and I was like, you mean like a week? She's like, no, like overall. And I was like, I was like, well, it just depends. I was like, I mean, it's not really a time limit. I was like, we could go for 2 sessions and you'd be like, okay, that's fine. Or we could go for an entire year and have several sessions. Like, some people do twice a week, some people do once a week, some people do twice a month. It's up to you and what you want and what your goals of the therapy are. So I'm like, I know she didn't know, but it was funny to me because just like your question, it was like she had this thought process in her head that I'm supposed to only come for like 10 sessions and then, okay, we're done. Like, I mean, some people, but who knows what we got to work through. And I mean, and then for that same client, I think she's dealing with something that she is not ready and not willing to talk about. But also I think that's the main reason why she's feeling these feelings that she's having. She's kind of depressed and having these like thoughts of, self-image and self-esteem. And in our interview, I'm like, okay, we're gonna gear this. I was like, it's up to you, but like, I have this thought that we're gonna work on this part of your life and this thing that came up in the session. And I think when you feel better about this, or when you accept this, then things will start to move forward and change for you in these other areas that you're mentioning. But people don't understand that something that seemingly has nothing to do with something else, that how could this possibly work? I don't understand how it correlates or what. And I think for her, it's too painful. And she doesn't want to deal with it. But I can see how it's affecting her, but she can't. And so I'm waiting. So like you said, she might, because her she was telling her mom about our sessions, which is fine, they have every right to do that. But her mom definitely came back to me and was like, hey, and she told me that you guys talked about this and she just wants to focus on this. I'm like, okay. So if I press, I'm wondering if she's gonna be like, nah, I don't want to go back, but unfortunately, that's that's where all those things are. That's what's most important to come up or deal with. And but it's again up to them. Like, if she doesn't want to come back, hopefully she finds another therapist that says the same thing, and then she'll understand that this is important for her to deal with. But we'll see. But it's not yet. But I'm gonna knock on.
I mean, I think from personal experience, it's gonna happen, and it's a humbling experience. Okay, I have been humbled many times, especially working with the teenage population, especially young kids. It's gonna happen, and it's a beautiful thing when it happens, because sometimes it just gives us the chance to really slow down even more. And then, okay, I'm gonna let you just take the lead then. Because maybe, I mean, even if you're given like suggestions, like they can come and say, I want this skill, you can give them all the skills and they say it's not working. Because, okay, we're not really hitting what needs to be hit. And you're right, like one of those things like to expect in therapy is your therapist is gonna hear something that maybe you have not allowed yourself to like really reflect on. Like you think, okay, I'm coming in here, my work is killing me, it's annoying, da 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 da. And all of a sudden your therapist be like, okay, tell me more about your relationship with your father. And you're like, what does that have to do with it? Like, but the connection, it's the connection. My therapist did that one time. I'm like, how in the world, like, why are you asking me this? And I was like, oh my gosh, I never saw that, and so I guess in layman's terms, expect to be read like a book. And you might be on chapter 1 and your therapist is on chapter 17 and they're ready to give you the story.
Part 2.
Right. Spoiler alert.
Seriously. That's so funny.
And so so I'm so happy you said that. But the truth is, at the end, like, we'll definitely, do our best to go at that pace, but like continuously like poking, I've had some experience. I had to say some things to some clients that even I wasn't ready to say, but needed to be said. And I can tell that they're not, sometimes like the truth is you're never going to be ready to hear some things.
Ever.
And you're never going to expect it. And you just, sometimes it's like, that's exactly what like you said, you need to get towards healing.
So and I've actually prefaced before with like trying to combat that, like, okay, like, where are you going with this? I've tried to like be upfront and be like, hey, look, we're gonna talk about things that you really are not gonna want to talk about. And my analogy is, it's like sand in a glass jar. You can pour sand in and it fills it all the way to the top. Then you start pushing that thing down, and what was already full has now been compacted, and it's just sitting in the bottom of that glass jar. And then you put more sand on top of it, and then this is your everyday life, everyday things. And then you pour another cup of sand on there, and then it pushes down all these things that you deal with that affect you, but you don't deal with, just keep getting pushed down. And then all of a sudden now you're lashing out on people, you're angry all the time, you're mad, and you're like, I've never been mad like this, I've never been angry like this. And now it's my job to start picking up that sand and digging real far down in there to get the compacted pieces and pull them out so that you can, have a more or less full glass jar. And so like, that's my analogy I try to start with to help them understand, like, it's gonna feel weird, but it's gonna be good in the long run. And so just know it's gonna feel uncomfortable because I'm gonna be digging deep down in that compacted sand. But just trust the process. So like, that's always my be. But they can forget all of those analogies and be like, what are you talking?
Right. Yes. I love that analogy. I'm gonna use that, because
please.
Some of my clients will give me a nice little side eye. Like, go back and go tell me a little about that age in your life. what? Like, you know,
we've been through this. We're past
right.
that.
It's like, I've already talked about this in the past. Oh, okay. I'm just curious.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So thinking more about, okay, so like after these sessions, what did you need from, because I know that we talked about like the switching of therapists and that experience. But as you start to like heal and you unlearned, right? Because I think therapy really is about unlearning, really access healing. What did that feel like outside of that? And we can hit it from both perspectives, right? What did it feel like to see your client like really start to unlearn and heal? And what was it like for you to start experiencing that for yourself outside?
Ooh, so stressful, lonely, painful.
Mm.
I felt very isolated at times, and it not even empty. One of my students used this word the other day, vacant, and I think that is like it means the same thing, but it's different. Because I didn't feel like a sad empty. It was more of like just there's space, like there's like things have been aired out, and now it's like I don't know, like I have all this space to just think. And now I'm pulling things back in piece by piece, and it's like there's room now to process. And it's like it's such a weird like experience, because like things that you knew about, and again that awareness that you thought you dealt with, and then when you actually, and I can't even describe, and I know you can understand, but it's like hard to even explain, because it's like until you get there it's not something that you really like put words to. But in addition to having my therapist, I've been in every type of mental health like situation that I could throw myself into, because I really do prioritize my healing now. And I think it's a continuous process. But I talked to a life coach who, he went to school for therapy and counseling, but he chose not to be certified because he wanted to do things or talk more and do certain things that he couldn't do under the title of counselor. There are restrictions and things, and it wasn't anything inappropriate. It was just like he felt like he could do more with what he wanted to do. I'm not explaining that the perfect way, but we did this. It was a healing and unlearning program. It's like a sessions of like really getting really deep into these past experiences and finding the inner child and figuring out what parts of that inner child really needed to be addressed, and like meditation, and like really like kind of putting yourself in a very zen moment, and where you're opening your heart, opening your mind through breathing, and then you ask these questions where it's like, okay, now everything again open and you're processing. So I think that was in addition to therapy, because I was actually talking it out at the same time. So I love the fact that he was pulling out these things from me, and then I was able to also then go to my therapist and process with that person about the things that I had just realized about myself. But it's all, whatever, it's all therapy. But yeah, and at that moment, it was very strange because I would cry a lot. And there's like this aha moment sometimes when you're sitting there talking through things that you, again, knew, but then when you say it and then you hear it, and you might have said the exact same way you've always said it. But you're like, wow, like, and then I think it also depends on like where you are in your life and your time and the things that are happening. I think there's like this serendipitous like experience where, you're growing. And I used to say like every year that I got older, something would become obvious that was always obvious, like more obvious, like a saying, I guess you could say, like, oh, what's a cliche saying people say all the time? Like, I don't know. I can't even think of anything. Girl, whatever. But any cliche saying now makes more sense to me as an adult, because I'm like, I'm not just saying it because it's something that people say. I'm saying it and I'm understanding what it actually means. And I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
All has meaning. Yeah.
It's really crazy. But I guess if I'm gonna be specific, I mean, like I was talking about my dad. there was this defining moment in my life when I was a kid where my dad had visiting hours, and he would come sometimes and other days he wouldn't. And for some reason, there was this specific day that I was at my granny's house and he was supposed to come and get me, and he didn't show up. And I don't know what it is about the day, but I remember it vividly. Like, I remember what I was doing. I remember sitting at the window. And this is not the first time my dad has come and picked me up. I bet he had picked me up a million times. But for some reason, this day, some trust was broken, and like I was devastated. And I my mom came back to come and pick me up from my granny's house, because she would drop me off. He would come and get me there, and then he would drop me back off and she would pick me up. And I remember sitting at the window, my granny was like, "Briana, he's not coming," because there was a time he was supposed to get there. I'm like, no, he's coming. He's gonna be here. He told me he was coming. And she's like, "No, he's not." And so my mom ended up coming back. She was like, "He didn't show up." And I was like, "No." And she was so mad, and she tried not to show me how mad she was. And I was a little kid. I might have been like 5. But I always said that was the moment that did it for me. That's when my trust was broken,
Right.
with men, and why I looked up and looked to men so much, because I need to replace or fill that void that was broken. But it
Right.
was not that moment. I realized through therapy that there was another moment like that, that my trust was broken by another father figure, my
Mhm.
sister's dad. And he did kind of the same thing. I used to be with him all the time from like 4 to 8. My sister was born when I was 7. Um, and I used to go to his Christmases. His nieces and nephews called me cousin. Like, we were like family. I thought my mom and him were going to be married. Um, but they ended up splitting because of my sister. He didn't want her to have the baby. And then he came back, and we did the Christmas thing. All those things happened again, but now my sister was there.
Right.
And there was this one day that I came back from practice, and nobody was in the house. It was me and my mom. But my sister should have been there, and my stepdad, and my brother. And I was like, "Where is everybody?" And she was like, "Oh, they went to the Christmas thing." And I'm like, "What?" Like, what Christmas thing? And they're like, "Oh yeah, Mark, he came and he got Amanda, my sister, and my little brother, who's not even he's nothing to him. He's like my little brother through my mom's other marriage." And that day, and after, like I said, going through therapy, I realized it wasn't that day with my dad. I
Right.
always thought it was, but it was that day that actually like really messed me up,
Right.
because I had decided, and I had made a conscious decision to put trust in somebody, another man who I trusted to be my father, and to not let me down and to not hurt me. And I had asked him to call him dad before. It never happened. But I felt comfortable enough wanting to. And
Mhm.
then for him to not only not ask me or talk to me about this day that was I had always gone to. Like, it was not like he had not had a discussion. He didn't say anything to me. It was just like, "Oh, she'll be fine." And in my head, that's what I thought. He didn't care enough to wait for me, and he also didn't care enough to
Right.
even let me know. Like, I guess it was like, "Oh, she's old enough now to understand. Like, I don't need to take her anymore." But that was something I really loved. I liked doing that with him. And so I couldn't tell my mom because I didn't want her to be upset. I couldn't tell my sister because she was like 3, and it wasn't her fault. And I couldn't tell him because I wasn't worth it. So I sat in those feelings as I think I was like 13, 14-year-old teenager, and just had to deal with it. It hurt my feelings for a very long time, until I went to therapy as
Right.
an adult
Mhm.
and talked through those. And in that day, Kayla, when I tell you, I bawled. Like, I could not stop crying when that floodgate was open. Realizing that, it was like this weird, strange moment of growth and hurt and pain. Like, and after that, I was just like, all these things were coming up for me, like, "Oh, and this is why I do this, and that, wow, and that's why and okay, now I'm making sense why I do this." And I'm like, "Okay, this is a lot.
Puzzle
This is
pieces. Yeah.
overwhelming." I don't know what to do. And I went through some states of depression, and then I was back to like happiness, but then there's like all these things coming at me, and then realizing, and sometimes being embarrassed by actions that, things that I did that the prior to the healing process seemed normal, but then after, I'm like, wow, that was a reaction and a response to something I hadn't even known that I was dealing with. And now I'm embarrassed because it was like stuff that, like, a pick me moment, or like I needed validation from this person, and then I was upset because I didn't get it. But I'm like, I don't need that. I didn't need it. I did, but I didn't, and I'm hurting people and doing things that I would not do. So yeah, it was a lot of emotions. And I don't know if everyone has the what's the word I'm looking for? The not luxury. It's, I don't know. Are lucky enough is what I'm saying, to have a defining healing moment like that. Some people go through the slow burn of like but for me, that was like this big moment that kind of changed the course of my my life a little bit. And so, sorry, that was a long explanation, but
I'm glad you said that, because you really one, thank you for being vulnerable enough to really like unpack that.
Yeah,
Say that, as I think that happens more often than people talk about, especially like that aha moment, sometimes we call it, where you recognize, oh shoot, there was a lot of hurt that's been happening. And you're right, it was like, okay, this is what I think impacted me the most, is really another part that's actually usually like more vulnerable and more hurtful.
Yes,
right?
after that, yeah.
Yes, it's like I can't get to that because I'm stuck on this. But really, it was something all along. And it's usually the thing that hurts the most, right? Because it's like I can't really work on that and touch on that. Right? It's like, it's not that I've been hurt before. Like, I can get used to it. It's the fact that I knew I could get hurt.
Yes, exactly. It was like you weren't hurt as much because you have been desensitized and you've been dealing with pain for a while. They're like, oh, that sucked. But
right.
I mean, I've been here before. But no, that's not okay.
Right. Yes. And I do think that moment sometimes, like what comes before that, like really brings a lot of people to therapy, because a lot of people, in my experience, this is just because I do a lot of like exploring shame and guilt. And I do think what brings a lot of people to therapy is that feeling like I'm responsible for like all the bad things that have happened in my life. I'm responsible for the fact that I feel this way. And I even heard that in your story. I have that in my story. I hear it in so many stories. It's just like, if I had done this differently, or if I were different, this thing would have never happened to me. Therefore, I don't need to come.
Yep.
And you're right. Once you start to access that, you look and you get to see, like you said, puzzle pieces earlier, all the ways that played out, and all the things that we do when we feel these wounds, right? And like when you describe that healing process, and I love that analogy, because when you were talking about it, talking about like I just felt vacant, like it was space.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode when they cleaned out the house. Yes. And he just looked around like, what? And it's the truth. It's just like, I have only known this house, right? Our bodies, like in our experience, I have only known this experience, this body. And now that it's gone, we like to think, oh, I feel so much better. It's like, no, like I've had a relationship with these experiences for so long, and now it's not there. Who am I, right? Because our identity was
going on.
So you may go through that like existential crisis a little bit, like what's life? Who am I? What does that mean? And you're right, every people only know you with that persona.
They
don't know that you.
I love that too, because I think that was part of my like like that kind of embarrassed feeling, because it's like people only know the hurt Briana. They only know pain Briana. Like they only know like what would have been different. And it's not like I regret, or because there's nothing to regret. It wasn't necessarily my fault. But it's like, what would have been different, and how would I have been, who would I have been back in college, if I knew how to have healthy boundaries and healthy relationships with guys, and learned that I didn't have to like prove myself or prove my worth to people, and that's what I remember about going through this. Is like I always felt like I needed to prove that I was good enough, or prove that I was somebody, and I always went for it. And I think a lot of people have that story, the having to going for the guys that they know not necessarily, or girls that don't necessarily want them, but it's convenient. And like I want to make you want me because I know that I'm worth it, but I need you to know.
Right.
So, but you don't, why do you need, if they don't know already, then you don't move on. But that was me, my entire dating experience. And it took me, my mom didn't let me date in high school. So my first time ever dealing with a relationship was as an adult, as an 18-year-old, somebody who was supposed to know how to do certain things. And no, that was like my first ever experience being romantic with people was in college. So like take all those
Come up at that time, yeah.
take all those feelings and things that I was dealing with and not being able to practice before college, and now I'm literally throwing myself into like these situations just so with friends, and it wasn't with just romantic related, it was with friends too. Like I needed you to know how valuable I was, and relationships for me are very important in my life, just in general. So like when I felt rejected, or I felt like I wasn't able to show people like who I really was, and which I wasn't. If we're going to talk about it again, it wasn't really me. I was trying to show people something that was buried way down up under all this pain. And that might have been part of the reason why there was a disconnect, like I know what I'm trying to do and I know who I'm trying to be, but then there's like, the only thing that keeps coming out is like, here I am. Like, look at me, see me. I like, can you please be my friend? Can you please, like somebody please, like, oh, wait. And so now I'm just like, I didn't need to do all that. And that's okay. But that's part of my growth and that's part of my experience. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So
yeah. And so I love how you describing like healing is twofold. One part is like recognizing, oh shoot, this is what was happening with me. This is like what I was going through, while validating the fact that you were hurt and that you didn't deserve all that. And then the other part is having compassion for the ways that you got through the only way you knew how to get through. And sometimes that's the hard part. That's the stuff that people, they feel like, okay, I understand myself. I'm in a much better spot. I think I'm good to go. I'm done with therapy. It's like, hold up, part two. Part two, because what is likely going to happen sometimes, those like, because I do a lot of like parts work. And so those like old parts, they show up still, right? They still are going to check in to see, hey, are you actually okay?
Right.
Do you still need me?
Come back.
Right. They showed up, the party over, what? And you got to keep
friend.
Hey friend, text you like, Merry Christmas. I'm just playing.
Right.
But yeah, they do that, and that's where other parts of therapy is like, okay, now that you've gotten to this point though, like let's what do you do when it shows up? What do you do to have compassion so you don't shame yourself back into that cycle again? And so yeah, so thinking about that, what advice would you give to someone that is trying to navigate, that's like in the fresh phase of like, oh, I'm learning how hurt I really am, and now I'm trying to unlearn that hurt, and it's feeling like it's a lot? What might you say to that person that's in that phase, like therapy?
And this is actually a harder question than like
I
think I would have imagined it to be, because that place is rough. Like lean into it, I guess it would be my advice, just because don't be afraid to react. We want to be proactive, but I'm reading this book, it's like emotional healing, emotional something. It's a great book. I can actually give it to you if anybody's watching or listening. I think it's an awesome book to read, and it talked about not reacting and understanding and feeling your emotions. Sometimes we reject our emotions because we don't want to feel more pain, especially when you just now realizing how hurt and how much this healing is bringing out for you. But the old saying goes, like, the best way out is through. And that is especially true for, I think, healing yourself. You have to, whatever comes up for you in those moments, lean in. Do not try to avoid, do not try to distract, lean in. If that means screaming, if that means crying, if that means, try to do your best, in public. I'm not saying jump on somebody and fight anybody, but don't lean in like that. But just,
Yeah.
recognizing and knowing and thinking about the feeling that you're having. So say I'm sad. Okay, what am I actually sad about? Okay, and then whatever comes up for you, then lean into that. So why is that making me sad? And then lean into that. So just kind of create this cycle where it's like continuously understanding and learning. Like you're saying, if we have a week until the next therapy session, that's the best way to really help yourself, is to keep on processing instead of trying to let things come to you. I think we do a lot of waiting, and we do like, okay, like, what am I going to do now? Instead of asking, what am I going to do? Just do whatever comes up. Whatever comes up for you in those moments, do that. Right. Like, but yeah, for me, it was definitely like crying and kind of doing this cycle of thought, and that's okay, and sometimes that wheel has to spin in order for us to take that one step out into the next wheel, because it's going to be several wheels that you're going to go through. But yeah, just really lean in, and and again, give yourself grace. Be okay with not being okay, because it does suck, and that's it. Being real, it sucks. It definitely sucks.
Say it with your chest. You were absolutely right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. Basically, I hear you saying like really got to trust yourself. Right. Know that you're not going to lean and like fall over. Right. And if you're worried about that, lean while you got somebody around you. Keep going to those sessions. Even if you feel scared, what's going to come up. And that's a part of the healing, is realizing you're no longer alone in the healing. And that whole piece.
Yes. And I love that too. If you said lean on to someone, I think it is important, like we were kind of saying earlier, to have people and, not bombarding people with your thoughts, but, being open with your friends and letting them know like, hey, I'm going through something right now, and I might actually need you more than usual, and you can prepare people in that way. And, hopefully there's friends or there's people in your life that they can just listen or just let you cry or whatever it is that you need to do. But yeah, definitely find those people in your life. If you don't have them, that's okay. But if you do, utilize those relationships, because those are super important during that time as well, having relationships.
Yes. Well, Bree, I have thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Like my heart, I feel so many feelings like right now. Like, this is definitely all the feels. I don't know if you feeling them, but
yes, I do. And I'm actually sad. I'm like, why don't we do this more?
I've been saying that to everyone. I was like, wait, we definitely got to talk more. Because this was just like off the bat. Can you imagine if we like hey, what's up in the middle? So I want you to know, like, definitely I'm your person too. And know that I'm gonna reach out to you if I need anything, and be respectful of that. But we both going through that piece of that healing, and as clinicians, right, and figuring out like that's a whole different ball game. Like, how do you go through that and still be present while you're helping other people?
Yes,
and other people's stuff might be activating your stuff, and you still gotta be present.
Exactly.
Saying to all therapists listening, like that's not talked about enough, but it happens. And so yes, okay.
Wait, let me see before I think this book that I wanted to show you is right here. Hold on, let me get it real quick. Yes, it's right here. Emotional Detox. This book, see all my little sticky notes. There's a lot of great antidotes in here, and it just the one thing I will say, it talks so much about fear and love, and I think that's something that it says the only two things. Oh, here we go. Name your emotions as either fear or love. Out of fear, we do not process emotions. We protect ourselves from them. And I think that's exactly in the healing process. Don't protect. I think that's what we've been talking about. Don't protect yourself. That's what you've been doing your entire life. So process them. Sit in them. Let them work themselves through you. And it'll feel so much better. It's written by Sherianna Boyle.
Okay. I am gonna have to read that myself, to be honest.
Yes, it's a great book. It is great.
Okay. All right, Bree. Well, thank y'all for tuning in. Like, do you want to let them know how to find you? Shoot, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an Instagram, but I'm transitioning my Instagram to my more work page. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Briana Isom, Instagram _BBreezy31. And I actually am on Psychology Today.
Okay.
If anybody in St. Louis is looking for a therapist, search my name, Briana Isom-Brummer.
Yes.
And I work with all populations. Like I said, I'm under supervision, so I'm just trying to expand my knowledge and learn as much as I possibly can. The communities that I really want to work more with are LGBTQ, and I want to learn about sex therapy as well. I think health is health. Sexual health, emotional health, physical health, all of it is important, and all of them can be great for our healing depending on what it is that you're going through. So hey, and if you are somebody who can help me with those things, like, let me know. You have my information. I'm sure lovely Kayla will share it with you as well. So
Oh wow, hearing you say almost Psychology Today, like, well, yes, well, thank y'all for tuning in. Continue to look at the episodes, reach out if you have anything that you would like to talk to us about or have us talk about, and we'll just go from there. All right.
okay. Thank you.